Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Generic Cappy YouTube channel. I hope you're all doing well and staying safe. I'm Amar, otherwise known as Generic Cappy, and in case you probably didn't know, but I know most of you probably do know, Nintendo did host the Nintendo Direct for the Nintendo Switch 2 today, and so I figured I would do a video talking about that Direct. My reaction is already up on the channel, so you can go and check that out, but I figured I would make this video to talk about the Direct, some of the information that we got after the Direct itself, and just, generally how I'm feeling now that the Direct is over, that we found out so much more about the Nintendo Switch 2. And yeah, so if you do enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like on it and leave in the comments below any of your own thoughts on the Direct itself. What was the most exciting announcement for you? How are you feeling about the release date and all that? And yeah, so without further ado, let us get right into it. So yeah, I just want to start off with, I think this was the best Nintendo Direct we have seen in a very long time, if not the best Nintendo Direct we've seen, ever. We had a bunch of good. Well, I wouldn't say we had like the biggest announcements. We had some smaller first party announcements. We saw some smaller third party announcements, some bigger third party announcements, and then we had big first party announcements. And I think that is what we really needed from this direct. We need to find out more about the Nintendo Switch 2. We needed to find out some of its games that will be releasing this year, and that is exactly what happened. So I'm very happy with this direct. I was very excited going into it, and I am still very excited thinking about all the games we saw, all the features we heard about for the Nintendo Switch 2, all the just general topics that we heard about the Nintendo Switch 2 and everything we heard about it. And yeah, so that is where I'm at with the direct itself. The Mario Kart looked really good. In case you did not know, the Direct was broadcasted in 4K, which is the first time Nintendo has done that. We have gotten a couple of trailers in the past that Nintendo's uploaded in 4K to the YouTube channel, but this is the first time they've ever broadcasted a Direct in 4K. And that obviously is because these games were shown off in 4K. There was a confirmation, though I'm sure most people probably already suspected and knew going into this direct, but the dock will be able to output at 4K, and that is probably how Nintendo recorded most of this footage. So 4K, we saw a bunch of 4K footage, which is really great. But our major announcements for this direct was Mario Kart Worlds, Donkey Kong Bonanza, so Banana Bonza, Banana Donkey Kong Bonanza, a new new Kirby Air Ride called Kirby Air Riders. We saw Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, and then we saw some smaller games from Nintendo. I don't think it really depends on how you feel about just the games in general, what you really want with your Nintendo Switch. But we did see two new games. At least we saw two new games. It's possible one isn't exactly a first party game, but because we didn't really find out a lot of information about it. But those two games are, apologies, I had to pull up the names of the games for a second. We have Dragon Drive, which is a basketball game that uses the Joy-Con 2, which they are now known as the Joy-Con 2. The Joy-Con 2's mouse controls to be able to navigate throughout the game, shoot your basketball. It also has motion controls, which is how you shoot the basketball. And then we saw the Nintendo Switch Welcome Tour. Those are seemingly going to be the two games that show off, the major gimmicks on the Nintendo Switch 2. All the features, all of the new, concepts that they've implemented into the Switch 2. It's very interesting to think about those two games. I'm pretty sure Dragon Drive is a Nintendo first party game. It seems at the very least that it is, because that's how they're pretty much showing it off on the YouTube channel. I mean, on their Nintendo website. But yeah, I'm looking at everything right now. Obviously, we had Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza. We saw Metroid Prime 4 Beyond Nintendo Switch Edition. So we saw a bunch of Nintendo Switch editions. Again, we saw Kirby Air Riders, Dragon Drive, Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, and we saw on the third party end the exclusive announcement of the Dusk Bloods, which will be an exclusive Nintendo Switch game made by the developer of Dark Souls and Elden Ring from Software. Obviously, we also had other major announcements. We saw Elden Ring is coming to Nintendo Switch. We saw games like Street Fighter 6 coming to Nintendo Switch, Yakuza 0. So, in general, we saw a bunch of big announcements and then some smaller ones. But I think Nintendo really did well with this Nintendo Direct. Again, I think there were some games I expected to see here that, weren't exactly here. I expected to see 3D Mario. It seems like a new 3D platforming Donkey Kong is what took that spot, which I am totally fine with. That's probably the biggest surprise of the Direct for me. I guess there was, four major game announcements here. Obviously, Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Kirby Air Riders, and Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. I think Donkey Kong Bonanza is honestly the biggest surprise for me from this Direct. I think a lot of people would also go with Kirby Air Rider or Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, but I went into this Direct expecting 3D Mario. If you watch any of my prediction videos, I felt like 3D Mario was the closest thing to a guarantee outside of Mario Kart, and we didn't get that. We got Donkey Kong Bonanza, which is the big guy is back according to Nintendo. Explore a vast underground world by smashing your way through it. It seems, again, like that is the 3D Mario equivalent for this console. It's possible it isn't. It's possible, in June or some point later this year, we do see the announcement of a new 3D Mario. But I'm just going to go into this right now saying that this probably is the 3D Mario team, EPD Tokyo, that made this game. But even if that's not the case, it was just such a big announcement, and it's not even that far away. It's coming out on July 17th. So it is pretty much the next big title for the console after launch on June 5th with Mario Kart Worlds. And or Mario Kart World, not Mario Kart Worlds. But we saw two games like with significant gameplay, and that was Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza. We didn't see Kirby Air Riders. We didn't really see anything from Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. We saw, I guess, the normal stuff we would see in our Hyrule Warriors trailer, but we didn't really see the gameplay. We did get an understanding that the story is what leads us into Tears of the Kingdom. We'll see if there's any story changes like they had with Age of Calamity. But they have confirmed that tomorrow during Treehouse, or tomorrow or Friday during Treehouse, they will be playing I keep saying Monster Hunter Worlds, but Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza. I think they have also said that they are going to be playing Metroid Prime 4. I could be wrong on that, though. I know they did talk about that they will be showing some of the Nintendo Switch 2 Edition games on Nintendo Treehouse tomorrow, but it's crazy to think that we know all these games already. We know that Mario Kart World is the launch title on June 5th. We know that Donkey Kong Bonanza is the pretty much next big title on July 17th. We know that in that time, Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour is also releasing on June 5th, 2025. Dragon Drive is probably releasing around then, if not on launch day, probably within the first 2 or 3 months of the console's launch, since they did say summer 2025. We do know that Kirby Air Riders will be releasing in 2025. I could see that probably being the August or September game. And while we're on that topic, I'm in my opinion, I'm seeing that the major games for this year will be Monster Hunter, Mario Kart World on June 5th, and then Donkey Kong Bonanza on July 17th. Probably either the release of Metroid Prime 4 or Kirby Air Riders in August, or Metroid Prime 4 could be in July or somewhere around there. But August would probably either be Metroid Prime 4 or Kirby Air Riders. September, I could see being maybe something we haven't seen announced yet, or Metroid Prime 4 again. October, I could see being the release month of Hyrule Warriors, though they did say winter, so that could be November, December. But I could see that coming a little bit earlier than they stated, and that comes out in October. or Pokemon Legends Z comes out in October. I think it's either one or the other. I think we see Hyrule Warriors in um, November, October, November, and then we see maybe something else in December. But we have pretty much our whole Nintendo Switch 2 launch year for the rest of this year. And then, we did get some tidbits of, Monster Hunter, Monster Hunter, not Monster Hunter. Metroid Prime 4 obviously is releasing on Switch, the original Nintendo Switch, at some point this year. Pokemon Legends EA is the same way, so those will also help to fill out the Nintendo Switch lineup. We did get a little bit of a leak of sorts from Nintendo themselves. During the Direct, they did show like a little screen that had a couple of like different Nintendo Switch games that you can just play on your Nintendo Switch 2 when that releases. And we did see a card, not card, but a art for Yoshi's Woolly World, maybe like the 3DS version, but Yoshi's Woolly World, we saw art for that. It could have been that they meant to put Yoshi's Crafted World there, but if that is true, I do expect to see Yoshi's Woolly World at some point this year, at least in the coming months, because maybe it was already supposed to have released, and for some reason they've pushed it off a little bit. But if that is real, I think we see it within the next month or two, right before the Nintendo Switch 2 launch, because it seemed like I think every other game has released on the Nintendo Switch that they showed there except Woolly World. So it would make sense, in my opinion, that Woolly World would release before the Switch 2. Now, normally with Directs, we talk about the games and that's usually it. But this was the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, so we did also get information on the hardware itself. We got information on games that, we got information on Nintendo Switch 2 edition of games, which includes, if I can pull that up, the release of Metroid Prime 4, Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, Pokemon Legends ZA, Kirby and the Forgotten Land Plus, which, let me get that for anything. Kirby and the Forgotten Land plus Star-Crossed World, which is a new, it's a new story according to Nintendo website. And we also got release dates for all these. They didn't show these in the Direct, but we did get release dates for these editions. So The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild will be releasing on June 5th. The release date for Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is also June 5th. July 24th for Super Mario Party Jamboree plus Jamboree TV. Kirby and the Forgotten Land plus Star-Crossed World will be on August 28th. Pokemon Legends ZA is still slated for late 2025, and Metroid Prime 4 is still slated for later this year in 2025. I guess, the features that they talk about for Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is the Zelda notes that they talked about, which will give us the ability, it gives us a little bit more insight into what the games are. They did confirm in an overview trailer released after the Direct about that these editions will have slightly, newer new content in terms of areas you find in the game. There's gonna be some verbal notes that are added to the game that describe certain areas, some certain feelings of the characters and stuff like that, which is very, very exciting. I think those are separate from Zelda notes, but they may also be, part of just what that general push for what Zelda notes are. But we see the support for Zelda notes, which is a game-specific feature for the Nintendo Switch app. So it is no longer the Nintendo Switch Online app, it's just the Nintendo Switch app. We saw that there will be improved frame rates and resolution, faster load times, and HDR support. For Super Mario Party Jamboree, we saw that this will be there will be a new exclusive added to this game, being Jamboree TV, which will include new modes that use motion controls, the microphone that's included with the console, physically, we have a microphone on the console, and the compatible USB Type-C camera. You can now have your actual self appear in the Mario Party using the camera through Camera Play. We have Game Share, which will be added for local multiplayer. We have widescreen HD resolution for TV mode, and HD 1080p for tabletop mode and handheld mode. And we see a visually enhanced game with improved frame rate. For Kirby, we see that will be a new story with star-crossed world and visually enhanced with improved frame rate. Pokemon Legends ZA will see improved performance with higher frame rate resolution, and then with Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, we will see the support of the mouse controls with the Joy-Con 2 controllers, enhanced resolution, textures, and load times. You're able to choose from 2 different display modes, with quality mode being 60 frames at 4K resolution, or performance mode, which will be 120 frames at 1080p or 720p in handheld mode. And both display modes will feature the ability to support HDR. That was a lot, and they talked about most of this in the direct, but I just wanted to mention that I saw that these things did get, these announcements did get dates that they didn't really mention in the direct itself. And I guess that kind of also plays into, again, Nintendo probably is releasing something else in August. So Kirby and the Forgotten Land, maybe that goes along with, Kirby Air Riders, but the game, the Nintendo Switch 2 edition of Kirby and the Forgotten Land will be releasing on August 28th. So maybe Kirby Air Riders releases maybe like in the early part of August. Same thing we're seeing with like Mario Party Jamboree. We're seeing Donkey Kong release the week before it. And yeah, so I just wanted to, mention those things. The other obviously big announcements was hardware related. So we see what the features on the Nintendo Switch 2, see what's new with Nintendo Switch 2 is the main headline on the website. But we see that they added game chat, which will be pretty much what the C button is. That's going to allow you to talk to your friends, talk to your, presumably not like online talking, if you don't know somebody like in actual like online games like Mario Kart World, we probably won't be talking with people using this feature, but it does allow you with your friends to connect to like a Discord type interface and just pretty much talk to them. You all can communicate while you're all playing the same game. You can share what your game you're playing like over, as an interface that somebody else can watch. And yeah, it's just a very exciting thing to see what Nintendo's doing with the C button. Obviously, there was a lot of speculation before the direct happened about what it could be. We did get closer to the point where it was likely going to be a chat thing, and in my opinion, I thought it was going to be a social hub. So this is like a mixture between the two. You're getting some chat. There's probably something social to do with it, because it does get on the UI on like the home screen. We do see it has its home button, so maybe there's a little thing that we can enter and talk, but mess with some settings in there. But that is like the main thing with like new with the controllers outside of the mouse mode, which is the other new thing with the Joy-Cons, which basically like a mouse. You can move around. You can use it to like in Drive and I forgot the name of that game, so let me get that before anything else. In Drag and Drive, you're dragging your controller across the desk or wherever you're playing, and it's also moving your character. So again, we see the mouse mode will obviously function as a mouse for your Nintendo Switch 2, which is very cool. And I think that's very exciting. We're gonna see probably a lot of new games use that feature. I watched a video earlier before I made this one where we saw that Nintendo also confirmed that they will be adding free updates to certain games, and there's games like Captain Toad that could benefit from the use of a mouse mode, to be able to easily, more easily like turn the camera around and everything. I could see that obviously being what they add to that game, since it is getting a free update according to the website. And yeah, so that's just very, very cool. They talked about the magnets. We knew about the magnets for a little bit. We saw it in the actual reveal trailer that the Switch 2 Joy-Cons, or the Joy-Cons 2 attached to the Switch 2 using magnets, and they show that these are very strong magnets, so they won't be easily coming off your Switch if you like try to tug them off or anything. It seems like the only way you'll be able to get them off is with the release button on the side. We saw smooth mouse controls, as I mentioned earlier. and then obviously the C button. So that's pretty much all we saw for hardware related things, and pretty much a lot of the gamer announcements. Um, you know, the last thing I guess I could talk about is the new Nintendo Switch 2 camera. Um, it is a sold alone as like sold additionally to the Nintendo Switch type of accessory, but you could use it and talk to your friends, with through video chat on the Nintendo Switch 2 with the game chat. So I think that's very cool. I honestly, I mean, I think I mentioned in my predictions, but I did think that's what they were gonna do with the top USB Type C. Obviously, we also had the confirmation that you can use that USB Type C to charge your Switch 2, which obviously does address the other issue that you couldn't really charge it when you are playing tabletop. So now you can. But I could see this honestly leading to more accessories being used, or more accessories using that top USB Type C port. Um, I think we've all seen the renders or speculation that maybe one day we can get um, an accessory that adds like another screen to the Nintendo Switch 2, and that's the way we are able to play DS games like through NSO, which is the last thing I guess I'll talk about when it comes to the direct, the GameCube announcement for NSO. But it's just really cool to see them do this. Um, but yeah, and we need the camera for the one of the new modes in Jamboree, so or through Super Mario Party Jamboree, Jamboree TV. So I think I will be getting that just because it seems like a cool accessory to use and play with once the Switch 2 comes out. Which, again, and then the Jamboree TV will again be releasing in July of 2020. I believe July 24th. So we'll wait a little bit longer after the console releases to be able to use that type of functionality, but still, I'm very excited for just to see how that works. But that is largely it. Obviously, the last major announcement from Nintendo themselves was that they are adding GameCube to NSO. We didn't really find out much more outside of that. If there would be a price increase on NSO, or I guess we didn't really find out the launch lineup outside of Wind Waker and games like Wind Waker and Soul Calibur. I'm expecting there'll probably be one or two other games. Well, they did show off other games. I'm gonna pull those up before I forget. They showed off. They showed off Wind Waker. They showed off Soul Calibur 2. They showed off F-Zero GX. And then they showed off. Oh, that's it. So maybe we see like one or two other games added to NSO after the fact. After before the actual service releases on the Nintendo Switch 2. But we also got the confirmation of games like Super Mario Sunshine and Super Mario Strikers and Chibi Robo and Luigi's Mansion will also be added to the service at some point in the future. So that's also, like, speaking just in a general sense, it is very interesting to see this happen because this does, there's been a lot of rumors recently that Nintendo would go back and remaster a number of different GameCube games for the Nintendo Switch. And maybe they still will do that since presumably this service will not be available on Nintendo Switch. But this does, in the future kind of make it to where Nintendo's release lineup likely will be things like, maybe like a remake of a game on GameCube NSO instead of like a remaster and things like that. So that's very exciting. That was pretty much the last major thing announcement-wise that I wanted to talk about here. Again, I really loved this Nintendo Direct. It had big announcements. It had smaller announcements. It surprised me in a lot of ways. I don't think really anyone expected to see Kirby Air Ride, get a sequel in Kirby Air Riders. I thought Sakurai would show up in this Direct, as just a game announcement. But I didn't think it would be Kirby Air Riders, which is really cool. Same thing with Hyrule Warriors. I'm not really sure anybody expected to see a new Hyrule Warriors be announced here, but it was, and it was a pretty big announcement. And then obviously we got the announcements like Mario Kart World, which we got teased in the Switch reveal in January, And then Donkey Kong Bonanza, which, again, I think a lot of people were expecting a 3D Mario. This time we got a 3D Donkey Kong. Maybe at some point in the future we do get a 3D Mario. Maybe they were like working on them side by side. And, you know, this year's 3D Donkey Kong, and then next year is 3D Mario. We'll have to see on that. But, you know, and that also speaks to the other thing, you know, just again, in a general sense, we are now in the 40th year anniversary of the Super Mario Bros. Series. So, you know, if they do have one more surprise for us, it could be something Mario related, like a 3D Mario coming out later this year or something like that. But we'll definitely find out more about, you know, what they have planned for that, either in a direct later this year, you know, in June or July, or even when Donkey Kong Bonanza releases and we're able to see who are the developers behind the game. But, you know, that is everything we really saw in the Direct, with some tidbits of things that we saw outside of it, like the release dates for the Nintendo Switch 2 enhanced version games. The last thing, you know, that we've seen largely since the Direct ended, and I will have to pull it up because I'm looking at an article for the Nintendo Switch GameCube NSO edition. But the last thing we saw was things like, you know, the prices. We did see that prices will range on games. We saw Donkey Kong Bonanza will be $70 at launch. We saw that the console itself will be $450 for the console by itself, and $500 with the addition of Mario Kart World, which is very interesting because obviously that is $30. Well, we did also find out Mario Kart World is $80, which is pretty expensive. You know, that is more expensive than even Tears of the Kingdom was. So that could be setting the precedence that we will be seeing a lot of Nintendo's major games, like, you know, 3D Mario or the next Zelda be also $80. But, you know, I'm not going to jump the gun on that yet because we've only seen one game with that price point. But it's very interesting to see that, because if you do buy the bundle, it is $30 less than getting it physically or digitally. You know, I think I'm going to try to get the bundle. If you do go on the Nintendo Switch, well, no, if you go on the general Nintendo website, you can now register your interest for a pre-order of the console. And there is some eligibility requirements, such as having a paid NSO subscription for at least 12 months, having around 50 hours played on your Nintendo Switch. I guess in general, maybe not. I don't think it's just for this year, but, you know, just in general. And yeah, so that is really everything that we saw in this Direct. You know, I think I'm going to do specific videos later this week on each game after we find out more about them at Treehouse. You know, we saw a lot of Mario Kart World and 3 new modes in the form of Grand Prix. We saw, I don't remember the name of it. Let me pull that up. But we saw Grand Prix. We saw Free Roam mode, which is going to be really fun to play on, because, you know, that adds something different to the games. You know, you're not always going to need to play Grand Prix whenever you want to race. You can just drive around the large expanded world of Mario Kart World, because it does seem like this game is open world to a certain extent. You know, the catchphrase on the Nintendo website for the game is "Everywhere is your race course." So, you know, that's what I'm expecting. You know, we're gonna be able to drive around, you know, explore the world. I'm wondering how, because presumably there's 7 Grand Prix, so I wonder how they're gonna handle things like DLC. You know, if we get like an expansion to the actual map or anything like that. We are obviously, you know, we're still 2 months, like a little over 2 months away from the game even releasing, so we shouldn't even be talking about DLC. But that's something I thought about. We saw, it said on the website that the courses will span across different plains, cities, waters, volcanoes, and much more. Again, everything is connected, which is very, very exciting. There's more to racing than just the course. Hop off the course and race the distance to the next one, which is very interesting. again, we're gonna have to see how all this plays out. Really, um, we do see the characters driving off the course in some of the actual footage we see for the game. So we'll see how that works out. But three main modes are Grand Prix, Knockout Tour, which is gonna be very interesting to play. I think I'm actually gonna play that more than I play Grand Prix, just because it's gonna be a lot more interesting. I think it's gonna be a lot more quicker because you don't have to play through every single race. You may fall back and not reach the rank or like where you need to be by the end of the race. On the website it does show that by the end of the first race, the first 20 racers to finish will go through. Then it'll be the top 16, top 12, top 8, top 4, and then that's it. And then whoever wins that will probably win the entire match. And then again, we got free roam, which is the first time in Mario Kart we're actually going to be able to just free roam, run around, maybe interact with some characters. Maybe the free roam is also going to contain some story content. We'll just have to see on that. But again, the game looks absolutely beautiful. I'm absolutely extremely excited to play it once it releases on June 5th. As long as I'm able to get a console, because obviously pre-orders open on June 9th, which is also something that we didn't find out in the direct. We found out through a press release from Nintendo. Again, I would try, I would at least register your interest on the My Nintendo store for the console, just as a backup in case you are trying to get the console but you're not able to get a pre-order in. It seems like that's going to be an easier way to actually, as long as you meet the requirements to be able to get a Nintendo Switch 2 once pre-orders go up and once the game, once the game's released and everything. There is something that I am seeing. Nope. Okay, so that's something different. But yeah, that is again pretty much it. There's not really much on Donkey Kong Bonanza just yet. We do have a website for it, but there's not too much more to find out about the game that we didn't see in the trailer. I'm very excited for Donkey Kong Bonanza. It's kind of crazy that we are getting this game. Even when it was revealed in the direct, I was still expecting is this going to be the major holiday game alongside Zelda, Pokemon? It's all Zelda and Pokemon, or Hyrule Warriors and Pokemon. But no, it is the next big game after Mario Kart, which is absolutely bonkers, and I'm really excited just to see everything. And we will again be having Treehouse on Thursday and Friday, so we will be seeing more of both of these games once it happens. I'll actually pull up the direct because they do show what games we'll be seeing in Treehouse, so that will give us a hint at what exactly how much time's gonna be allotted for each game and everything. Let me get that right now. So it says that we're going to see games like if I'm able to get it. So we're going to see Mario Kart World, Game Chat, Super Mario Party Jamboree, Dragon Drive, Street Fighter 6, the Zelda games, Welcome Tour, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Bravely Default, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Nintendo GameCube, and Metroid Prime Beyond, which will be the first time we actually are able to see Metroid Prime 4 Beyond in action. And I'm kind of feeling, we didn't get a release date here for the console. I mean, not for the console, for the game. I'm thinking we probably get that during Treehouse. Unless it is still a ways out, they could drop a announcement for the release date on social media in the next coming, weeks and months. But I think at some point we are going to get a release date. I think it's going to be fairly soon that we get that release date. But yeah, I'm very happy with this Nintendo Direct. I mentioned it on some accounts last night, and I think on Family Boards, because I do have an account on Family Boards. But I did mention that we've all been looking forward to this Direct for such a long time that it's kind of crazy to think that it was finally here. It's now passed, Now we know so much about the Switch 2. Now we have Treehouse segments tomorrow. It's just really crazy to think about all of this happening so quick, but also be something that we have looked forward to for so long. You know, uh, you know, we are gonna obviously get more directs in the future. So, we're still gonna have more game announcements happen this year. At this point, usually by June, we are gonna hear probably at least one game announcement for next year. So we will see that in June probably, or July, or at least by September, we're gonna have games announced for next year. And that could be, that's gonna start the next phase of the Nintendo Switch launch lineup. But yeah, that is all I have for you all today. As we get more news, or as Treehouse shows more footage of the games tomorrow and on Friday, I will be making more videos. I will be making probably some videos on Mario Kart World, maybe a couple videos on Donkey Kong, maybe a video on Donkey Kong Bonanza once we find out a little bit more about it at Treehouse tomorrow or on Friday. But yeah, I've uploaded a good amount of videos in the last couple of days for this direct. Now that this direct is over, I'm just looking forward to covering the Nintendo Switch a little bit more. Nintendo Switch 2 a little bit more before it releases on June 5th. If you all enjoyed this video, please feel free to leave a like on the video itself. Leave any comments down below of your thoughts on what the direct showed, any of the information we got after the direct. But without further ado, I hope you all do what makes you happy, because that rhymes generic happy, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.